Today I'll be walking you through how I customized a Parks DV6 and prepped it for install. This is the first Darth Vader I have built, and just to clarify, I do believe the DV6 is the aesthetically superior variant of Darth Vader's lightsaber. As always, I will have a parts list as well as a few tools and supplies in the description. To make this particular replica movie accurate would require a lot of changes and part swapping, so I'm going for ballpark accuracy with the available parts included in the original kit. As you can see, I'm starting off by rounding the corners of the grips. Again, I'm not going for dead-on screen accuracy, but rather a decent representation. After smoothing out the finish of the plastic with some Scotch-Brite, the bonding surface can be cleaned and grips applied utilizing their adhesive backing. I'll follow that with some weathering applied by scratching and cutting with files and then softening those marks with Scotch-Brite. And then this is a good time to apply a light layer of grease to the threads, which will keep them functioning smoothly. Now I'll go ahead and disassemble the rest of the hilt in order to properly access the individual parts for finishing. This is pretty simple and mostly involves removing a few screws that are finger driven or utilize Allen keys. The one slightly tricky bit is these pins, which can be removed with fine pliers or a couple DIY methods, but after removing several sets myself with various at-home methods, I made the splurge and got myself a nice 1/8 inch hex driver. I'll link it below for anyone interested. And like my other Amazon links, it is an associate's link, so if you use it, I will get a little kickback to put towards future videos. With the hilt disassembled, I'm first going to scuff up all the parts with sandpaper and/or Scotch-Brite, focusing more on some areas in order to lightly remove the black finish and begin creating the weathered look. I go about this process without much planning, but rather by looking at the parts as I come to them and asking myself where the most wear would occur from years of service. This way, I hopefully achieve that believable look that most well-used things in the Star Wars universe should have. I also like to add some deeper scratches and pits by sharply hitting the parts with hard steel, obviously my go-to tool being files. Now moving on to the chassis, you'll see I chose to get it printed in white. This is because I really love the look of it after adding paints, markers, and leather dyes. However, it is a good idea to check that all parts fit properly and determine what on the chassis needs modifying, if anything, before you begin finishing it. For this build, I'll be installing a 21700 battery, so this 18650 holder needs to go. For the first layers of color, I'm using gray and silver Sharpies, as well as liquid chrome pens, to build a metallic underlayer. I'm doing this mostly in areas that I want to show through the top layers later on. I follow the metallic layer with a mahogany dye that lends itself well to a look of corrosion, applying it more sparingly yet. Then finally wiping on a black dye over everything. I then let it dry and sand over the areas I want to re-expose. This allows for a very subtle show through of the underlayers, which I then add to by going back over the dye with metallic colors and mahogany dye. This takes a bit of time, but the end result is really nice for a bit of plastic. Moving back to the hilt for a bit, I'm going to degrease all the metal in preparation for applying aluminum black. To do that, I'm thoroughly wiping down everything with isopropyl alcohol. I want my pommel to be assembled for this next step, so I'm attaching the D-ring assembly now. One of the few specialty parts added to this build was rivet screws by Skywampo. Due to their nature of imitating rivets and having no other tool-driven fastening method, I tightened them with screw removal pliers. Not absolutely necessary, I just wanted them to never come loose. I then added a small amount of permanent thread lock on the other side and added the nuts. Onto the aluminum black. I'll saturate a shop towel in the aluminum black chemical. Then using an old torch that may be familiar to some of you more knowledgeable Star Wars fans, I'm heating up the metal before application. The heat really helps it set well. Without the heat, I'll also be adding a bit to the grip section and other components. And following that, I'll adjust the aluminum black with some Scotch-Brite to get just the right look. Don't worry about that emitter, we'll come back to that. I'm going to fit the metal rods for door retention into the chassis. This includes cutting them to length and making the proper hole for them, which I accomplished with some melting and trimming of the plastic. With them in place, they can be marked and then cut. I left the ends of both the decorative and functional rods flared a bit so they would stay in place better. I also added a small amount of E6000 adhesive. The chassis will need some sort of retention system to hold it in the hilt, and I chose to drill and tap a hole just above the threads in the upper section of the hilt, where a set screw can be easily installed. Now for the crystal, I found that 1 5/16 inches long, or roughly 34 millimeters worked for me. If you can get one that's close to 1/4 inch wide or under 7mm, it will probably work best with a crystal chamber. I used super glue and E6000 to set the metal chamber parts and crystal in place, though the friction fit for me was very tight by itself, with the crystal size taken into account. I then painted some black spray paint onto the chamber parts using a cotton swab from whatever leftover paint can was on my shelf. This can then be wiped off the polished metal where desired, leaving it in lower areas to create definition. You'll notice that I painted the emitter section of the hilt to get a nice finish. Flat black spray paint over the surfaces that had the aluminum black cut mostly away with Scotch-Brite leaves a really nice look and texture. And now I'm using a fine grit paper to take just a bit of the paint off here and there. Oh, and here is the black I used since I failed to catch a shot of that in process. Here's a neat little trick that you may find works well for you too. I can't remember where I picked this up, but it is really excellent. In order to leave room for the speaker and bottom of the chassis, as well as aligning the D-ring to a more screen-accurate location, use a few wraps of plumber's tape on the pommel threads to get a tight fit without screwing all the way on. A little personal love of mine is heat coloring fasteners. You can get golds, blues, and blacks pretty easily depending on how you heat the metal and how you cool it. I just eyeball as I go to get a nice black or blue, and I want to take a good look at my handiwork before moving on to the install, so I'll throw everything back together on the hilt and get those fasteners in place. One more tip for today. You can use various methods to achieve a non-rattling D-ring, such as magnets, squeezing the ring tighter on the mount, or using flexible adhesive like E6000. I'm going to make sure I have a decent blade fit and retention as well before giving up the final glamour shots. You can see that this bit here is rattling, so I need to make a few adjustments. You can see the custom resizing I've already added the screw, and now I'll just shorten it a hair. Man, is this hilt a beauty. I'm gonna be honest, this one was hard to let go of when the time came to ship it out. It just looks so damn good. It's incredible, really, what a bit of time and elbow grease can do to make a stock hilt look its part as a prop. Thanks a million for watching, everyone. Please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you again soon for part 2.